So I came in 1990. The alliance was formed in 1987. So, and I came about because Tupper Thomas, the administrator of the park, the city administrator, and then the president of the Prospect Park Alliance, was looking to start up a design office within the organization to begin to oversee design projects and construction projects. They had been going on um, since she started in 1980 as administrator, but the focus had been at that point, those first 10 years or so, was updating the buildings, restoring them. Many of the buildings were closed or in really poor shape. So her focus initially was the buildings. And when I came, she turned toward the landscape. There were these historic landscape reports that were being created by Tony Walmsley's firm, and there was plenty of design going on, but she still wanted an internal design team to take on projects. I was a city employee. I worked for the New York City Parks Department, came there in 1988, and that's how I came across Prospect Park. I mean, the Walmsley reports were really invaluable, but we also had the annual reports and then the Olmsted papers that that Charlie, Dr. Beveridge, sorry, I call him Charlie. I've known him for years, um, being the editor of those papers. We spoke to him and we actually invited him when we were doing our ongoing restoration work in the ravine in particular. We invited him down and had him walk through some of our restoration efforts to make sure that we were on target and making sure we recreated as best as possible what the Olmsted and Vox intent was. So yeah, NAOP was definitely a part of that whole thing. I know Tupper was deeply involved in it early on, and I was a trustee at one point. Um, there were many layers. When it came to trying to do the historic preservation aspects of the park, the taking the Walmsley reports, we went to Fairstead. We went to the Homestead, as we said, to do research. We went down to the Library of Congress. We dove in the early 90s for sure to get a better understanding of what the intent was, because we don't have the original plans. Like Central Park, as an example, has the original plans of the park design. We do not have that. We only have photographs, annual reports, which is most of our reference. Just speaking in the general public, they're looking at a beautiful urban park. I don't think the majority of them actually would know who the original designers were or how it came about. And then there are those who do know. They come here from, whether it's students or historians. I don't think they come to it naturally. I think, um, but more and more people are interested. And when I give talks, they are really curious. I give a lot of tours, and I still will be giving tours in the park and bringing the historic material, and they're always well attended, and people love that stuff. You'll be walking along and you'll see this stone, looks like a curb or it's a header, but that it's just there. And I come along and I can have with a historic photograph saying, well, this is where this building was at one time, or this is where the thatch shelter was, because people do question them, and then they start looking around, if they see something a little unusual, they'll ask those questions. Then once they've enjoyed the park, then they want to go deeper, and they become very possessive of what they have. People embrace them, and they're very much needed. I think what's so significant is that most of the incursions, um, or the interventions, if you will, that had taken place in Prospect Park were on the perimeter of the park. So there is a, for those who don't know, there's a ring road essentially. There is a perimeter landscape, and then you cross over this drive or go underneath through the arches, and then you get into the central core of the park. And the central core is the woods, water, and meadow for the most part. And that is mostly intact. There are a few additional or later interventions, like the picnic house and the tennis house, the boathouse, these small structures that are in the landscape. But the landscape itself, like the long meadow, 2/3 of it, 3/4 of it, is pretty close to the original intent. Has not, doesn't have any interventions. There are the ball fields at the south end of the meadow, but the long meadow pretty much is intact. Of If you were back in 1872 walking through the park, obviously the trees would be different, but the whole shape, that whole feeling, um, it's still there. So I think probably of the 526 acres, the majority of it is still Olmsted and Vox's vision. Any of the new additions are pretty much on the outside around the perimeter. Well, I can tell you that was very fun working with the Biltmore Estate people, going down there, and they came up here, uh, and I gave them a tour and we walked through. That was fairly, our restoration was fairly recent at that time that they were looking at, and they heard so much about what we were doing, and they wanted to see if they could take any of those ideas back with them. And they took the ideas and they took me, which was very, very enjoyable for that short period of time. I don't have one. It's difficult. I mean, after so many years, I think the the series of projects that were so informative for me, so challenging and so rewarding, were the ones around the watercourse, reconstructing the watercourse from the upper falls in the Fallkill, which is in the ravine, all the way down to the boathouse, and actually to Terrace Bridge, which was a box structure, the last one that he did in 1883. I think it was 1880. Um, that's 3/4 of a mile long watercourse. We rebuilt waterfalls, um, uncovered a waterfall, reconstructed ponds, the stream, bridges. We redid, we reconstructed 2 bridges. So we restored the woodlands in that area, this landscape. So it was just a major alteration of what was there. It was a completely destroyed landscape, honestly, frankly, and nobody wanted to go into that area. So it was perceived as being so dangerous. And so what we were able to do through a number of phases is reconstruct it, um, and just march down that water course. That's probably the most rewarding. There were many projects I've worked on, but I think that had such a big impact because it brought people back to the middle of the park. Um, what's interesting about subtle changes. So when it comes to Prospect Park and the preservation, we do our best to do that. I think the first question that I always said to my design team, when we were working on a project in an area, and if they proposed deviating from the original design, and the design intent, my question always to them is, if you're deviating from the original design, what are you deviating from? Meaning, what is it? What was the original design intent? And if you're deviating from it, why are you deviating from it? Is it because it has already been impacted? It can, somebody in the later decades had changed it. Um, uses changed so much, whatever it was, I needed them to justify instead of just changing it because they wanted to be a designer and they wanted to put their footprint or their imprint on the design. So we always started with, if you're deviating, why? The design is really so solid. I mean, I love Central Park. It's a completely different kind of space. It just gets overwhelmed with people. We have a lot of people, and you then there's Central Park, which is just on a whole different level. But it's a pretty amazing space. I liked Franklin Park when I was there, even with the golf course and some of the mess. But you can see what the importance of that park is in the neighborhood. And